Right, good morning, Oorsee Family. Walter Jackson here. I wanted to provide an update after our last video about the refugee application process. We have been absolutely inundated at Oorsee with questions, and I wanted to go through some of those and just answer, as best as we know right now. The process is not been finalized yet, and I will actually show you why and how that works. Uh, and just wanted to clarify some of the misconceptions. Quite a few people commented after my video last week with Leon Fashfeld that this is not an immigration issue, it's a refugee issue. Well, that is just categorically incorrect. This is an immigration issue. You get certain types of visas to other countries, and they might fall into non-immigrant and immigrant visas. So non-immigrant, typically tourist visas, and excuse me, and maybe a short-term work permit, or you're a student, or you go do seasonal work. You'll never get citizenship. Well, for a refugee, it is definitely an immigrant visa. It is a pathway to citizenship. You can apply for a green card and must apply for a green card after 1 year. So this is a pathway to citizenship to the US. And as such, it's handled by the USCIS, and I'll get to that in a bit. Uh, so it's an immigrant issue. That being said, you don't need an immigration lawyer, right? So again, we will say this at every video. Anybody asking you for money, uh, claiming they can help you better fill in the forms, that's just absolute nonsense. You don't need that. So just be aware of scams. Don't give anybody any money to help you during this process, right? And then just from Oorsee, and I have to do this bit in Afrikaans, so if you don't speak that, just skip ahead, we'll put a link. Maar hoekom doen Oorsee dit? Ons organisasie is gestig net om Suid-Afrikaners wat reeds in die buiteland is te help. Net om met mekaar in verbinding te kan tree, reële braai en dit is wat ons doen. En dan ook die tweede deel daarvan is om 'n bietjie van ons erfenis en kultuur lewendig te hou. So ons het 'n app waar jy kan wat jy kan aflaai verniet en jy gaan en registreer daarop en dan gaan soek jy net maar net mense naby jou, ander Suid-Afrikaners, reële braai, reële kuier, wat ook al, gaan kyk rugby saam. En dan ook om ons erfenis uh te probeer bewaar, kan ons 'n paar goeders wat ons aanpak as projekte. Ons werk saam met SA Events en ons bring kunstenaars na Australië en Amerika en UK oral. Okay, so dis Oorsee en dis hoekom ons dit doen. Ons vra ook vir niemand geld nie. So kom ons dan let's jump into the questions, right? So I'll do the rest of this video in English and I'll put some links up. So the first question we had that came up quite a few times is who can apply, right? And here we have to kind of be very specific, right? So the process of who can apply is any minority in South Africa, right? President Trump specifically called out the Afrikaners, but that's been slightly kind of adjusted and clarified on the US, on the State Department and the embassy website to say minorities. So here you have to be very careful when you apply because you have to claim that you feel persecuted in your own country, right? You are claiming refugee status, which is a very specific term. It does not necessarily always refer to war-torn countries, and I'll probably superimpose the website, the document over my ugly face so that you can see the process. So United States Refugee Admissions Program, or USRAP, they have 4 categories. So who can apply? Initially in priority 1, that would be the UN High Commission or the State Department or some NGO say, hey, America, here's big trouble here. Come and get some refugees. There's a war. That's P1. And that's typically what you think of as a refugee, is this P1 category. But there's also three other categories. P2 is groups of special concern. Now, President Trump has specifically said Afrikaners and now clarified to be minorities in South Africa. So that's a group of special concern. That's the category that most people will apply under, we believe, right? Category 3 is family, or P3 is family reunification, and P4 is private sponsorship through some government department, right? So that is not applicable. So under P2, you will apply. So you're not going to be that refugee that is necessarily P1, where it's a war-torn country. You're just a group of special humanitarian concern. So that's when you can apply, and you have to then go through a screening process, right? So the first part of that is the Department of State sets up a program. So when President Trump referred to the Department of State and the Department of Homeland Security, these are the two departments that are involved in this process. Department of State deals with all the foreign policy for the US. So they're setting up a program, and that's where the process is now. The Department of State setting up a program to aid refugees in South Africa. Okay. So that means the first kind of step that you will see in South Africa is they'll set up a Resettlement Support Center. That might even be outsourced. The Department of State sometimes outsources that to third parties who are, and it's typically the IOM, the International Organization for Migrants. They sometimes set up the initial phase. So in terms of the process, here is where you will apply. Okay, and getting back to who can apply, South Africans can apply if they're a minority. And who can apply with you? Your spouse, and in the most basic terms, that would be the easiest to explain it. If you're married and you have kids who are unmarried and under 21, you can apply together. Now, what happens if your child is 20 and a half years? Well, discuss that with the person that's going to give you your initial screening and ask them about it, because it might be better for your child to just apply on their own right, not underneath your application. So you can also apply for a same-sex marriage. I don't know how easy that's going to be to resettle in the US. Not every state is as accepting as others. Again, no judgment from Oorsee's side. We don't get involved. We're just telling you the facts here. If you're living together, that's a bit more difficult. I went through this process with my wife when we applied for immigration to the UK many years ago. We were just engaged, not married yet, and it caused a lot of complications. So discuss that with the person that's giving you your interview. Okay, so that all happens at this, what they call Resettlement Support Centers, RSC. And you're going to hear a lot of three-letter acronyms. It's only the government or any government that can make stuff this complicated, right? So you can now apply, and then you go to this Resettlement Support Center and you do apply. What happens next? Well, they will pre-screen you even before you get to the USCIS. They'll pre-screen you, make sure that you're eligible. They'll educate you about the process and basically give you the information that I'm giving you now. And more importantly, they'll prepare a case file for you. Now, that is typically Form I-590. That's your application document as a refugee, right? That is your application process. So now I've discussed who can apply. Now, how do you apply in the process? Okay, so it's Form I-590. And they will start with some initial biometrics, right? So basically, they will then check through the National Vetting Center whether you have a criminal record, whether you have belonged to any organization that supports terror or violence, or you're a fan of communism, right? They will go and check all that and make sure that you don't have a criminal record. Now, not all criminal records automatically disqualify you. They're really looking for violent crimes, more specifically, and you will be asked these questions over and over again through this process. Now, if you then pass the initial screening, then you will be passed on to the USCIS, right? And that's the US Citizenship and Immigration Services. Lots of acronyms, right? And they will go through the Refugee Access Verification Unit. And basically, they will check your fingerprints and your photographs and your biometrics and do security checks against the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI. Right, and everybody goes through this. We went through it, and we came over on a different immigrant visa, not refugee status, but you still go through the same process. They take all your biometrics, they scan your fingerprints. The difference here is refugees are not required to pay for any of this stuff, right? The whole process is free for you, okay, up until the point when you're approved. We'll get to that. So you go through all these steps, and you will get to the interview with USCIS. You will sit there and they will interview you, and they're going to ask you, do you feel threatened? Right? Have you ever committed a crime? And you cannot lie to these people, right? If they catch you, you will never be allowed back in or anywhere near the US ever. So you have to be honest and say that you truly feel like you're being persecuted in South Africa and that you want to escape. And that as a minority, the ANC government is oppressing you or taking away rights or taking away potentially land or property. And you are going to have to make your case and explain why you don't move to Cape Town or Carnarvon or KwaZulu-Natal or wherever. And you're going to have to say that regardless of where you live in South Africa, you are still under the ANC government. And, it's not like the murder rate in Cape Town is low. So you're going to have to make that case why you don't move somewhere else in South Africa. And at this point, if you have a European passport, it's going to be very difficult to say why you didn't just go to Europe, right? So if you have a passport to another country, or you work in another country, or you live in another country, it's going to be very difficult to say that you want to go to the US because that's your first choice. That's not how it works. You can go to the US if it's your only choice. If you don't have a passport to another country, you live and work or don't work in South Africa because of the government's policies against minorities. So that's how that process works. You're going to go through that interview and you have to convince that person that you are really in fear of your life or your property. Okay. Two things can happen after that. They can approve you and then you move on to the next step, or they can deny you. Now, there's two options if they deny you. They will deny you on a certain aspect. You can apply to waiver that inadmissibility. So basically you're saying, yes, I don't tick all the boxes, but please ignore the box I didn't tick, and still things are so bad in South Africa, I need to escape. Give me a refugee status anyway. Okay, so that's the one option. The second option is for just ask them to adjudicate and review the whole thing. Like go through it again, maybe add some additional information or whatever, but basically it's an appeals process. Okay, so that's what happens if you're denied. If you're approved, you move on to the next phase, and that is you got to go through medical checks. And this will be provided at this Resettlement Support Center that will be in South Africa. Okay, and they will do a medical screening. When you pass that, you are passed on to the Resettlement Support Center to, still in South Africa, to receive some cultural orientation. They might teach you a few things about the US and what to expect, because it isn't exactly like all the TV shows if you've never been here. It's a wonderful place, but, don't expect it to be perfect. So they will provide you with some cultural orientation. The next step is the Refugee Processing Center. That's kind of in the US, right? You're still in South Africa, but you'll start to get information maybe about which state you'll be sent to and how you will be provided with support in the US, okay? and then they will arrange your flights. Okay, and this question came up a lot. Who's paying for the flights? Well, you are. Typically, a refugee is given a promissory note or a loan to get the flight, and that's outsourced by the U.S. Department of State and the USCIS. They use an organization called the International Organization for Migrants. Typically, they arrange travel. So yeah, you can usually if you bring a pet, bring a suitcase or two. But remember, you're a refugee. You're not gonna bring all your tools and your I mean, anything with an element won't work here electrically wise. Your hair straightener or whatever you want to bring, it's not going to work here because the voltage is different, right? Uh, so you will have to pay for that flight, not upfront. They will give you a loan and they will expect you to repay it when you get settled in the US. Okay, so that's the next step is your flight. You've been approved, you've got all the support. Initially, your medical screening, everything is fine. Now you get on the flight, then you get to the border, and now you're dealing with the US Customs and Border Protection Agency or um, Border Patrol. They will conduct additional background checks at the port of entry, and then you are submitted or admitted into the US and you arrive in the US. Okay. A lot of questions, and obviously what happens next? Well, then you'll pass on to the ORR, and that's like the Organization for Refugee Resettlement. Okay. And they now take care of you. Okay. So you've arrived in the US. What support are you going to get? What are they giving you? Well, typically for the first 30 to 90 days, they will aid you with accommodation, food, clothing, appropriate clothing for wherever you are placed. And we don't know where you will be sent. That's part of the details that they're still working out. But you'll go to some settlement area where the federal government is now uh, involved totally up until this point. But now you might have to deal with state and local government. So the state where you are sent, well, they will say, well, we'll take some Afrikaners. We like, uh, we have space and the capacity to deal with some immigrants, so send them to us. And they might send everybody to one area just to kind of help with the settlement. You don't have to stay there the rest of your life. Okay. You are sent to a certain area and you're given support. Well, what does that support look like? Well, usually you get about $2,275 per refugee at this stage from the government website, right? And that's for your initial needs for the first 30 to 90 days. It might not just be cash in hand and you can run off and go buy your own stuff. They might give it to you in terms of here's a house, go stay there. Here's some clothing, here's some food, but that's what's been allocated to you per refugee. Medical issues, you will be given another medical screening and check when you get to the US because they want to make sure you're healthy and you can integrate into the US society. They will also help with job placement, employment preparation, give you English language training if you need it. They help get your kids in school. So there is a lot of support initially. Very important for anybody thinking about applying for this program. All of the support is temporary. It's designed to get you here, get you on your feet, and then it's up to you. Then it's sink or swim. This is not a welfare state where you will get support the rest of your life. Okay? They want to get you here because you're escaping persecution. They will help you settle, and then it's up to you. You will have to work and create and build your own life here. You will not get support like you see in Europe, where you just get given a house for life and you can sit there and go on the dole and just collect social welfare benefits. It's not like that. And another question that came up a lot, what about if I'm older and I'm on pension and I can't work? Well, again, there is some short-term assistance. There's like a supplemental security income, and you can go on to Medicaid when you come here for medical assistance. But if you're a pensioner and you don't have an awful lot of money, I don't think this program is for you, to be honest. It's very expensive here for medical aid. As a family of four, my wife and my two kids, we pay well over $1,500 a month, and that's already subsidized by her company. It's expensive. Medical treatment could bankrupt you here, even for Americans who've lived here all their lives, selling their house at the end of life to pay for medical care if they didn't have the right medical insurance. Now, there is Medicaid, there is government assistance for people who can't afford it, right? But that is always also up for the political whim of whoever is in charge, and they might take it away, right? Obamacare, as they call it, or the Affordable Care Act, could be removed, and then you have no safety net. So be very cognizant of that. This program, in our opinion, is really designed, or not designed, it's for everybody who thinks they're in danger. You can apply. But I think it would be beneficial to somebody, maybe a young couple or couple with young kids or kids, at least people who have several years still to work, uh, where they can build up some pension in US dollars. Okay. Another question, pensions in South Africa. Yeah, you can transfer it, talk to your pension company. It's very specific because there'll be a contract involved. We can't speak to that. Go and speak to your own pension advisor, and you can transfer it, but just be very cognizant that the rand does not go very far in the US. And if you are getting a pension in South Africa, it could be a stipend, and you might have to work here, till you fall over, unfortunately. Okay, next question is about uh, what if I want to bring loads of stuff with me, right? And people mentioned tools quite a few times. Um, well, not all of your tools will work here, first of all. They use a different system. They're on the, excuse me, they're not on the metric system. So most of your tools won't work here. And secondly, any electric tools probably won't work here. Um, it's going to be difficult. You're a refugee and you are paying for the flight, as I said. So when you get settled here, they get you a job. They're going to say, okay, give us back those flights. So it's going to be hard to bring all your belongings and ship all your stuff here. I mean, that's not what a refugee does. You're trying to escape persecution there. So yeah, so I'm going to post a list here of some additional support. There's quite a few church organizations that can aid and support you when you're here. Some non-church organizations, NGOs, charities that can help you get on your feet. But again, most of that is really targeted to get you on your feet. They're not going to carry you. Okay. And maybe lastly, I just wanted to talk about the cost of living comparison. So, how do you figure out what you need? Now, initially, it's really hard to try. You're going to convert everything back to rand, and it's going to shock you. But rather think of it like how weak the rand is should be a shock, as opposed to how much you're going to convert it back to. Okay, when you earn in dollars and you spend in dollars, you will typically have more expendable income, especially if you're struggling in South Africa to get work. There is still a lot of jobs here in the US. Everywhere you go, they're looking for people. Okay, so the best website I found to maybe give you a comparison that's is kind of on the same level is a website called Numbeo. You just go and type in your email and register, and then you can do cost comparisons. They will, I mean, you type in Kempton Park and you type in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it gives you a comparison of what it costs to live there, what rent is like, what it, you know, milk and bread costs, how much you typically earn versus how much you pay for rent, and all of your insurances and stuff. It gives you a really good comparison on a high level, and then you're going to calculate what kind of your cost of living is like in the US. But in our experience, you kind of, if you want to convert it back to rands, earning probably 3 times what you would in South Africa, but your expenses are double. But we certainly have more expendable income in the US than we did in South Africa or the UK. But that's also, I mean, our careers have progressed. So you would expect to go up in income in South Africa too if you stay in the same career. But that's just in our kind of experience what we found. And then maybe one last one, one last question, and we'll do this again next week. Please post all your questions, and we'll go through it. Last one. What about my qualifications? Right. Yeah, that was a good question. So if you have, let's say you have a degree. I did my degree in Potchefstroom, so I just had contacted the university and had them translated to English, so that I don't have to pay a third party to do it and verify it and whatever. I got it straight. My degree transferred from Potchefstroom. They just did it for me in English, and then they want to see your classes, and that has to be in English, and sometimes maybe a transcript kind of with all your grades. And I just emailed them, and they sent it to me, and that was accepted in the US. So and in England as well. By the way, I did my master's there, and I'm doing my doctorate here. So they've accepted everything from South Africa, in my experience. That might not be true for all degrees, so you're going to have to go check that on your own before you leave. What if you just uh, have a degree, you go and check it online, speak to your university, but make sure you get done what you can in South Africa before you leave, because it's much cheaper to do it there. What if you have a trade certificate or some other qualification? Have it verified in South Africa, check whether it's internationally acceptable, work out a plan, how you're going to transfer your skills and prove it uh, in in the US. Okay, you have to do some of their own legwork here, right? We can't go and research every trade skill, every qualification, as much as we'd like to help. That's just not feasible for the manpower we have and the time we have to help. So go and do your own legwork and make sure that your qualifications are not in Afrikaans, Zulu, Xhosa, whatever language it's written in South Africa, and get it translated, get it certified. Make sure you show up in the US with that. Okay, so I'm gonna let you go with those questions. I think I've heard enough of my own voice, but please keep, uh, you know, in the comment section, keep writing those questions, and we will find the answers for you to the best of our capabilities. Thank you, and goeiedag.